Good day. Yesterday I think it was fitting that it was the last day of the month, and month end is usually a terrible time in financial markets, depending on which month end you're incurring. You're incurring month end, you're incurring options expirations, you're incurring redemptions, you're incurring all kinds of rebalancing. And it was fitting, if you ask me, that we had a technical problem yesterday as we were trying to decide what we were going to chit chat about, and decided to scrap the whole show
Hey,
and
it
just say
happens.
screw it.
It happens. We wouldn't have been any fun yesterday either, so it happens. But we're back today and looking at Bitcoin. We are, 26,866, and we are in the middle of all the debt ceiling drama. It looks like it's going to pass the House, which was, I think, the only real obstacle last night. You've seen a lot of people chit chatting about it, but basically, let me try to sum it up for you. They're going to print more money. Uh, they've got all these things about spending cuts, and I mean it's absurd. It's ridiculous, and essentially, the title of the video is basically a tongue in cheek by Elon, but I don't think it's tongue in cheek. I mean, he basically said he was on an interview and he said, pretty soon 44 billion won't be worth that much anyway, and you kind of laugh at that and you go, okay, like whatever. But then look at what they've done to debase the money. There's no end in sight of them debasing the money, and with this debt ceiling deal or whatever you want to call it, there's unlimited spending until 2025. There's no cap on it. They're saying $3.5–4 trillion. I mean, Ted, it sounds like it's already done. I mean, you
This was
cannot.
already decided before any of this stuff. Okay, this was like last. I bet you. This is what I think. All of the people that really run the government, they got together last year at Christmas while the rest of the sheeple were celebrating Christmas time. They all got together on Jekyll Island or wherever in their like the weird like Batman style cave command center where they all get together and smoke cigars and drink really expensive whiskey. And they're like, "This is how it's going to go down, everybody." This is the same. It's in this. I'm speaking in the vein of Bill Hicks when he describes what happened when Bill Clinton became president back in that day, and he said politicians, whichever side wins, the left or the right, after the election is over, they roll them into a dark room with a bunch of cigar smoke and a projector, and it just says. It shows an angle of the Kennedy assassination that no one has ever seen before. And then after that, the lights come on and they look at the new president and says, "Any questions?" And then the president says, "What's my agenda?"
Yeah.
That's
No,
that's what I think happens every year or every.
no. Well, you wonder, these guys get in there and they have all these big campaigns. They're going to change everything. They get in there and it's like, there was one when Trump got elected that was absolutely hilarious. He was making like a face, and it was kind of like, and it was like when it's like when the Pentagon tells you have to build a space wall to keep the aliens out, and it was just like, oh my god, But this stuff is, it's all you can do is laugh, because getting there's nothing getting upset about it is going to do. Because we can't change any of it. You've got these people in there that are supposed to represent you, and none of them do, right? This whole thing is a disaster, and they have an unlimited purse now, right? Like this
Always
wasn't
was.
this wasn't some sort of win for any, especially not for the American people, So I think they're gonna add the IRS thing. The more agents are coming. Like, I think somebody said that like they got like 1.5% less money than they were going to get for that. But there's, so that instead of
Yeah,
like 87,
1%.
there's, instead of like 87,000, there's now like 85,500 new IRS agents.
So it
Like,
was 80 billion for the IRS, and now it's what,
I don't know.
78 billion or something. I mean, whatever the math. I was told there would be no math, but anyway,
it's
the
absurd.
cuts are ridiculous. Like, to put it in perspective, what was the difference? It was like, we're going to cut 50 billion out of this, and we're going to do these other things that make that cut insignificant. And when you're talking about being 32 trillion dollars in debt and cutting 50 billion in spending, So what's that like? That's like being $32,000 in debt and then saying, I'm not going to spend $50 on dinner and drinks tonight. Is
It's
that what,
worse.
is
It's
that right?
worse. It's worse than that. That's right. But you also are getting another loan for
Credit line increase.
$400,000. You know, it's like it's absurd. It
Right.
really
So
is.
So yeah, one of the most important things I've seen in my lifetime is when somebody, and I'm embarrassed to admit that I didn't think to do this myself, was to take all of the zeros, start chopping some of the zeros off, and bring it down to a number that we can comprehend
Yeah.
as individual citizens. And when I started looking at it through that lens, I was just like, God, what a ding dong I've been to sit here and try and think in $1 trillion increments when I should be thinking in hundreds and thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars increments, to put it in perspective so that you can wrap your mind around. Once you do that, it really illuminates the terrain. And then you hear these numbers tossed around, and then you think, and the other really glaring thing that I'll say about this is that in previous iterations of my professional life, I've been able to look at income statements, and like when public companies report, they show their here's our top line income and our top line blah blah, and it says in millions, and it's got, you see, I should have taken a cue from that, but gee willikers, man, if I could go back in time, I'd punch myself in the
Well,
face
that's a
as a
problem.
child.
That's with all this stuff is it's a problem. It's like everything they do though. It's meant to confuse. And this morning I tried to pull up some articles to kind of show exactly what was in the debt deal. But you have all these articles from like the New York Times, ABC News, and it's all BS. I mean, they don't talk about, they put these headlines up like, the spending cuts are 50 billion, and then what they should say right after that is, but they're going to be able to borrow 4 trillion, or say, hey, the spending cuts are 50, for comparison, the spending cuts are 50,000, but they're going to borrow 400 million. Like it's just very frustrating and confusing. And I think the bottom line conclusion for all of this is we are $32 trillion in debt. That debt is not repayable. Like that, they're not gonna ever. They've already screwed the pooch. And maybe it goes up to 50 trillion. Maybe it goes up to 200 trillion. But what does that mean? Well, what that means is your purchasing power. It doesn't mean the dollar is going away. Like it just means the dollar's buying less. Every single dollar buys less goods and services. And that's I see all these people want to big brain this and make throw all these complex things into it. It's not that complicated. And when you are $50 trillion in debt, who's going to buy that debt? Or how are you going to convince other countries that this is some other than with tanks and guns, but you can't fight everybody all the time.
I have something from Mike Alfred from yesterday at 3:07 p.m. It looks like Eastern. It says the market thinks the debt ceiling deal is basically done, which we now know that is what was a good way to prognosticate and think about it. It said DXY, which is the dollar index, is firm. So the world still wants to hold dollars and thinks America is a good bet, comma, in spite of steadily increasing monetary dilution. Okay. That's what you can't count on anything but death, taxes, and monetary dilution in this particular system. The last sentence, this deal, comma, if signed and put into law, is bullish for USD, Bitcoin, and America. Now, you don't have to agree with those statements, but I think what he's talking about is exactly what you just said, is that the dollar doesn't go anywhere. It creates if Treasury is going to issue bills and pull the dollars out of the marketplace, so to speak, it is not by proxy. It is de facto creating demand for dollars at large scale. So demand for dollars is still high. The other scathing reality here is that compared to other fiat currencies that are issued by other governments around the world, the US dollar is still the best game in town for them. They haven't, I'm talking at a scale that we really don't know how to comprehend. I'm talking globally, I'm talking hundreds of millions, if not a billion or more people that rely on the US dollar to live, and they don't have a better choice. And they probably don't have an on-ramp to things like Bitcoin and crypto. And that's
Well,
that.
you ask anybody in any country what maybe barring China and Russia, they want dollars. It's just
We can't get
it's
around that right now.
yeah, and so that's the system that we live in, and like it or not, that's what it is. I personally think that this is just another step in the road to the inevitable. What the inevitable is, I think you're looking at a world where that you just can't buy a lot with your dollars.
It's the
You know,
debasement and dilution issue that we face. And thank goodness that we have things like Bitcoin. I mean, well, the rest of the world is still waking up to Bitcoin specifically, but gold has been the thing. And that, I mean, looking at the short-term price of gold, you can say, well, why isn't gold rallying? Or why isn't Bitcoin rallying? And I'm telling you, like this, the effects of debasement and dilution have yet to, the follow-on effects from this action are yet to hit the marketplace, so to speak, or hit the market. And I think
I agree. I agree. I mean, I think it takes some time, and people get when you talk about Bitcoin, is Bitcoin an inflation hedge? And over a 10-year period, you could argue potentially, but on a day-to-day basis, I think it's more of a protection against debasement of your purchasing power. And so you can look at gold's the same way. I hear all the crazy stuff is, I'm sure that people are aware of some of the crazy stuff, but people talk about them getting rid of the system completely and implementing some sort of like news. I mean, I don't know that any of that's on the radar. Like, so what do? I mean, you just take steps to protect your purchasing power, which is Bitcoin, gold, silver, real estate, art, all of those things. But in the meantime, you still have to earn income, and you earn income in dollars in the United States. And so after inflation, taxes, and your bills, whatever you have left over, you need to find some way to preserve that purchasing power into the future. Stocks are a good example too, but if you look at what Nvidia has done, Ted, you always talk about it. They had a killer performance, and then the next day they came out and issued a ton of more shares. You
yeah, they
text me
issued $10 billion worth of shares, new shares,
yeah, well,
into the
hey,
market. Like,
welcome to the game. But
like a
it's
classic pumping. I mean, oh, Jesus. I mean, how it's perfectly legal though. They followed
well,
every rule in the book
well, if you're
and
them, why
waited.
wouldn't you? Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, so stocks are potentially a good option. These things are, we talk about this all the time, Ted. Like, sometimes it feels when you talk to people about Bitcoin and crypto like you're pissing into the wind. And there's going to come a point where you have to understand this stuff. And the sooner you do, the better off you're going to be. But this stuff doesn't happen over weeks or months long periods. This stuff happens over years long periods. So, that's why we always say take your time, educate yourself on this stuff, and do what's ever comfortable for you. And, stay away from the meme coins and the, 99% of crypto that's totally garbage. And so, I think it's a very simple message to people to learn about what's happening with, our dollar, and take steps to protect your purchasing power into the future. We believe Bitcoin and crypto, certain cryptos are good, but we're not going to, again, this channel isn't about picking the next hot altcoin. We just want to help people understand why they should look at, Bitcoin as an alternative to, some of the other assets like gold or silver or real estate.
Yeah. I hear Raoul Pauls and Mike Powell's from Cross Border Capital, like Raoul Paul from Real Vision and GMI, like the global macro investor uh, thing that they offer. I hear their words echoing in my head about the more cowbell, which is
Yeah.
more like basically the thesis, which is I didn't come up with this thesis. I just know where to. I mean, I know how to listen and then look at what is happening in reality and see do they line up. And I have to say the thing when Powell and Raoul Powell and the other guy from Cross Border talk, they're speaking the same thread. They're coming at it from different angles. They're coming up with a similar conclusion from much different starting points, and the reality is, or the bottom line here is that the debasement is the problem that is going to continue to happen. There's going to be more debt, more rolling of the debt. And as Raoul Paul says, if you don't get or they both say, if you don't get the roll, you have a problem. You don't care about interest. You're not interest rate sensitive when the issue is binary. You either get your debt refinanced or you default and have a big problem and you're quote unquote out on the street. Like if this was if we had a mortgage on a house and we had to refinance, we don't. I mean, it was life or death, or basically, I have a place to live and sleep, a roof to sleep under, or I'm out in the rain. You don't care about interest rates, and none of that stuff matters in that moment because the role is what matters. Period. So that's what's been teed up here, if you ask me. And then the thing. If I could leave anyone listening as we transition into the second thing here, is forget about interest rates. Forget about trying to pick stocks. Forget about trying to find what the next meme coin, altcoin sensation that's you have just as much odds as picking the right lottery numbers. You're better off playing the lottery, in my opinion. You have better odds, and at least you have a piece of paper to hold in your hand with some numbers on it. If you buy meme coins that go to zero, you have nothing. Literally, the point I was trying to make is that if you want to stay ahead of the game and protect yourself, you get smart and right with the debasement action. The thing that is happening is monetary debasement. It's dilution. Get smart about debasement and how it affects your purchasing power over years. Look, you either get busy living or you get busy dying, from the Shawshank Redemption. I mean, I've seen that movie, blah blah blah, whatever. It's like this debasement crap is happening whether you're paying attention or not. So if you're paying attention, there's things you can do, because you can't stop debasement. You get in front of the problem, you learn about what it is, and you learn about Bitcoin, gold, silver, and other things that will rise in value as the purchasing power diminishes. Anyway.
Well, it comes back to the old quandrum. If you're a Bitcoin holder and have been for a while, okay, so say Bitcoin goes to 400,000, but the dollar's debased. Okay, so that in that scenario, a gallon of milk costs $30. So you say you're going to sell your Bitcoin, but sell it into what? You're going to sell it into dollars that are, but it's a whole other topic. But what we wanted to talk about here today is a tweet from Bob Lucas. And he's saying Bob's an analyst and he understands the 4-year cycles of Bitcoin. This is cyclical. We've talked about the fact that it's typically revolved around the halvening. However, it's more than likely revolved around liquidity cycles and the business cycles. So there's some confluence between the Bitcoin halvening and these liquidity cycles. But basically what he's saying is, imagine still being bearish on this chart, perfectly structured 4-year cycle in the earlier phase. A pullback in June to the lower 20Ks would be a tremendous gift. And we've talked about that a little bit on this channel, where we say, look, I personally believe we're close to the end here of, this bear market it's been the longest bear market in crypto history. You've got a lot happening with the debt ceiling. There's a lot of wonky stuff happening politically and geopolitically all over the world. This summer is going to be interesting. If Bitcoin pulls back, to the 20K region, that's a gift, because, don't empty your bank account and, put yourself in a terrible position. But if you're dollar cost averaging in and you're buying Bitcoin every week or every month, this is a great gift, because long term, the path is up and to the right, not just based off some chart, but based off of everything you're seeing happening in the world today. I mean, if they were taking measures to cut spending, reduce the deficit, strengthen, I just don't see that happening in a way that's meaningful or at all for that matter. They're going to continue to debase the money. They're going to put more liquidity in the system, and they're going to play the same game they've been playing for the last 70 years, 50 years, whatever, ever since we went off the gold standard. So
The last thought I have on the change, the politically more than anything else, is when the boomer generation gets further along into their pullback or their retracement en masse from the labor force, and our like productivity levels fall, and more importantly, when the like 50% or more of the boomer contingents start to want to cash out their retirement and start living off that, like selling stocks, selling bonds, and selling assets like financial instruments. Okay, then the market is going, like the financial markets are going to go the other way. Like there's not going to be any amount of stimulus or buying or propping up of the financial markets that are going to stem that bleed. That is, to me, is politically, that's the time to watch the stock market have a massive correction when way too many people are trying to sell, and there's just not enough participation in the labor force to generate the incomes that are required to be the buyer of last resort from the general public. Because then and this is just my like armchair analyst's thesis here, not financial advice, but I think 12 years from now, maybe 15, when this really gets into high, and this is really in high gear, then politically you can say, oh, we've got to do something about the deficit, and it gives you all the cover and all the optics to start cutting programs and saying, we're not going to prop up the financial markets because your constituents are now way too aged out, and most of them are getting ready to go over the Rainbow Bridge and all that great stuff. And I think the political climate will be different in those days, but I mean, who knows? I mean, I'm probably wrong, but that's what I think about today is what we never had. And this is something Raoul Pal talks about. You don't have to take my word for it. He talks about the boomer generation and the things that they did the things that have happened as a result of them existing, like participating in the labor force at such a large scale is really what has killed wage growth and all of these other things that a lot of people don't think. They don't factor these things into their thinking when they're saying, oh, well, it was Nixon that took us off the gold standard that ruined everything. But no, a lot of things happened all together, confluence. Okay, and I think things get different in the world when the boomer generation ages out. And I think, but we have other things, other tailwinds. There's tech, which is deflationary. This, whatever this AI thing becomes, which is a whole other can of worms. We won't even get into it. But back to the point of the chart that you're looking at, I think it's entirely reasonable to think that what Bob Lucas is talking about here is that if this crashes all the way back down to the 20,000 level here, that would be pretty amazing. Excuse me, I got the hiccups. And looking at this monthly chart, it's incredibly powerful to me to look at the way, history doesn't repeat, but it sure does rhyme most of the time. And I think that what's happening is that you've got a lot of cash sitting on the sidelines that are waiting for this pullback to that orange line, which is that 20,000-ish level. I think if I've got I can't expand the scale, but that's awful. It makes an awful lot of sense what Bob Lucas is talking about here.
Yeah, and I think it's just important to keep in mind, that it's not going to be the end of the world if Bitcoin drops. It's an opportunity. The last thing I wanted to talk about is our favorite senator says crypto funds fentanyl trade and it's time to shut it down. This is just absurd. Like, this stuff, you don't even get mad about it anymore because it's just so ridiculous. But, pretty soon, they're just they want to blame crypto on everything. I mean, it's it's 1.5 trillion dollar market cap. There's companies, Nvidia is going to be worth more than the entire crypto market cap.
It
And
already is,
does
isn't
Nvidia
it?
does Nvidia facilitate the fentanyl trade? I mean, it's absurd. I mean, what facilitates the fentanyl trade is, there's no border security, right? And the stuff just comes through. And I don't know if you've ever bought drugs, Ted, but usually they take dollars. They don't take
Yeah,
crypto. And it's
you
it's
notice.
beyond
Yeah.
stupid. Just one point here. It's beyond stupid to use Bitcoin to do illegal activities because it's not completely private. It's pseudo anonymous. If they find your address, they can track everything you do. So if you're a major criminal, the last thing you're going to do is use Bitcoin. That's the dumbest thing in the world. But what they do is they prey on people that don't understand it, and it's just absurd. What funds the fentanyl trade is U.S. dollars. U.S. dollars fund everything in the world. Is she talking about cutting off U.S. dollars? It's ridiculous.
You know what? The only thing worse than her is that Watcher Guru here is perpetuating this nonsense for their own gain. I think that's
Yeah,
the bigger crime here.
yeah.
The other thing to remember is that you shimmy on down to good old Mexico and try to use crypto to buy heroin from the cartel members. They will shoot you in the face, and
It's just so
you'll have a
stupid.
very bad day.
It's so stupid. Like, and it doesn't even matter. Money.
Yeah.
What they should be focused on is preventing fentanyl from entering this country. That's what they should be focused on. And they should be focused on getting rid of open air drug markets in the middle of our cities. They shouldn't be up there. She's flying around on a private jet shitting on crypto, not doing a damn thing to stop. It's absurd. This lady's a clown. Like, it's stupid. It
The
really
most
is.
important, the best part about this, like anytime Elizabeth Warren speaks, is that it goes absolutely nowhere, and it's almost as a non-issue as is when she proposes legislation and finds a co-sponsor for a bill. You can here. You know how we should use Elizabeth Warren like the inverse Kramer. So whenever Kramer says, "Ah, we're really into Pacific Western, let's buy here," short it. So anytime Elizabeth Warren says, "I'm proposing a piece of legislation with co-sponsor clown number two over here," you can set your watch that it's a 99% chance it goes absolutely nowhere in committee and just gets flushed like a turd.
We need an inverse Warren. Like,
That's exactly what I'm saying here. So that's it's the only thing that makes any sense, because what she says never makes sense. She
well,
panders and panders and panders and panders, and
we're about to be $35 trillion in debt, and she's running around flying on her private jet, ripping crypto. It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Eventually, people are going to stop listening to these idiots. I don't. I think if we got rid of 90% of them, we'd be fine. By get rid of them, I mean vote them out, or make their jobs unnecessary. Like they're just not necessary anymore. They're more. They're just leeches, man. They get 200. What do they make? 100, $200,000 a year to run around, and it's absurd. Let's save some money. Let's fire these people. But anyway, that's a
yeah.
good spot to wrap it up for today. I think debt ceiling. I think will probably get passed today. Keep an eye on crypto markets. If it dips, I think it's an opportunity long term. Not financial advice, but you know, really think about how to be preserving purchasing power. That's what we want to help people try to understand. I think in the future, Ted and I are going to talk about other things. We love crypto, but we also love a lot of other things too, and it all plays together. So stay tuned. You might see some changes on the channel, but we're still going to be crypto focused and want to try to help people understand how this plays into what's happening in the world and how it affects your life daily. You have any last words there, Ted, before we wrap it up?
Just you got to do your own research, and you have to, in my opinion, you have to come to your own conclusions, because those will give you peace of mind. When you come to your own conclusion and are able to make a decision rooted in your own understanding and belief, then you're doing what's right for yourself, in my opinion. And all I'm trying to encourage anyone to do now is just get right with understanding like how monetary debasement works. It's a very slow burn, it's slow bleed, and it's detrimental long term. And if you care about what your life's going to be like in 10 or 20 years, 10 or 15 years from now, like now's the time to start thinking about that, and behaving accordingly in a way that serves your own interests first. Anyway, that's it.
Agree more. So we'll flash the disclaimer here. Nothing we say is financial advice. We're not accountants. We're not lawyers. It's not accounting advice. It's not legal advice. If you enter the crypto markets, or any market for that matter, you do it at your own risk.